What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Shuggy, and today we're going to be talking about the Alec Baldwin situation again. Previously, I made a video discussing the situation, and in that video, just to summarize it real quick, I mentioned that there's documentation from the Actors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, that prop guns are to be treated as if they're loaded at all times, and therefore any improper loading of the gun, with actual bullets as opposed to Alec in this interview that we're gonna watch calls them dummy bullets. Any other impropriety as regards to the gun does not absolve Alec Baldwin of responsibility. Ultimately, he was the one holding the weapon, and therefore he holds some degree of responsibility. Ultimately, legally speaking, it will be up to the courts to decide that. So we'll find out what goes on with that. But I just want to say that he recently did this ABC News interview. And just to not bury the lead, I'm going to say that this interview changes absolutely nothing. And my points all completely stand. Now we're going to react to some of the things that he said in this interview, and I just want to say I'm not saying Alec Baldwin is the devil or anything like that. I just want to make the point and stress the point that gun safety is everyone's responsibility. He's doing this interview to try to absolve himself of responsibility in the public eye, and I just don't feel that it's right. So I just wanted to come on and say something about it. But ultimately, I haven't been covering the story. Normally, we cover lighthearted stuff on this channel. We talk about, Walking Dead, and I review stories, ultimately things of little to no consequence. So I that's what I want to do on this channel. But, it's a good platform for this, so I figured, I figure it's appropriate. If you guys disagree, feel free to, mention in the comments. But I just want to say certain things about it, and I hope you guys will listen to what I have to say and let me know what you think in the comments below. So Alec Baldwin recently sat down with George Stephanopoulos from ABC News. I haven't been covering the story, all the updates that come out. Honestly, I just don't really put too much stock in news articles and stuff like that for getting information right. I trust direct sources first and foremost, and this is directly out of the horse's mouth, so I consider this a direct source. So that's what we're going to cover on this channel, and I'm just going to react to a couple clips from his video and show why I don't think that this really changes anything in regards to how I view the situation. So let's just jump into this part one of this interview.
The second thing is that all of what happened on that day leading up to this event was precipitated on one idea, and that is that Helena and I had something profound in common, and that is we both assumed the gun was empty. Other than those.
Now, it's an understandable assumption. I'm not saying that, of course they both assumed that. I'm not saying he's lying or anything. We'll just take everything that he says at face value. I just want to say that them both thinking that the gun is empty, it doesn't absolve you of any responsibility. If you think your gun is unloaded and you point it at somebody and shoot at them, you're still responsible for that. So again, this understanding that he said that they had, that both of them thought the gun was empty, doesn't change anything. Also, I want to stress that in the Screen Actors Guild documentation, we discussed previously how you treat the gun as if it's loaded at all times, no matter what. So, in a movie set, there are times where you have to point it at people, like other actors. And in that case, the actor is supposed to check, and other people on set are supposed to check to make sure that there is nothing loaded in the gun. Including the actor who gets the gun pointed at them, that is a part of the protocol. I will link to that documentation in the description if you're curious to find out more. And you can read through it yourself. And whether he discusses that he hasn't followed this procedure on previous films, and he also acts like this hasn't happened before. But The Crow is a film where it has happened before. There have been other prop gun accidents in the past, so it's not a new thing. And I will say that if other productions are not following these protocols, that is on them. And it should be that way going forward. And I mean, they've had this in documentation for many years. So that's, again, not really an excuse. But we're going to keep playing here.
Those, dummy rounds.
I want to get into more detail.
Again, I want to stress that he's calling them dummy rounds to downplay what it is. And we'll look at it later. ABC News says that there is not an explosive charge in it. That is false. And again, why I don't trust news reports. They don't have the projectile that launches out. They still explode. It's still gunpowder. It's all of that. That's why you don't point it at anybody, especially anybody. You don't shoot at anybody close because, there could be things lodged in the barrel, as I mentioned before. But even if there wasn't, it is an explosion, and these are things that can burn you at the very least. So it is an explosive charge, despite what ABC News says. Again, don't trust news sources.
Tell on the day in a minute, but let's take a step back. What was it that drew you to this project in the first place?
Okay, now they're going to talk about the movie. I don't care about that. That's fine. We'll skip ahead here.
And the people who spend the money. My consultations or approvals were completely about casting and about the script. I don't hire anybody in the crew. I don't
Not even the cinematographer, no one?
No, but he will apprise me of what he's doing.
So here he admits that he is apprised of hiring decisions, but then tries to brush off responsibility that it's not his decision ultimately. And, whether or not that's the case, as the producer, there is a collective responsibility, and he is acknowledging that he is apprised of these decisions. So I think feigning ignorance in this case is not going to do him any favors. But, we're not going to get too deep into that because that, again, will be decided in court. Moving on.
We spent an hour and a half shooting the pistol.
They're talking about the armorer here.
Her safety instructions.
Did you think she was up to the job?
I assumed because she was there and she was hired, she was up for the job.
And
as somebody who's responsible for making decisions on the film, I can understand producers not being involved with with deciding the crew, and there's definitely a ton that are. But this statement, I think, is particularly egregious. Just because somebody else made a decision doesn't mean that you should just assume that it's the correct one. But again, we're picking out low-hanging fruit here. Let's get to the real bulk of it. This is the main part of the interview we will be looking at.
There, who have got me, two guys are
So he's describing the scene that is being shot.
there, who have got me, cornered, and they think I'm shot pretty bad, and I'm kind of wilting, and they have a gun, and then the sound outside distracts them, and I then draw the gun, cross-draw out of my holster, pull the gun up like that, and start to cock the pistol cut.
Okay, so here's what I want to stress with this part. He mentions that he cocks the gun. For those who don't know, revolvers, you don't need to pull the trigger in order for the gun to go off. If you pull the hammer hard enough, it will fire. And also, these guns tend to be temperamental. A lot of these 6-shooter revolvers, people will tell you not to load the 6th round because if you put it in your holster, you might accidentally shoot your foot off because the hammer might get jostled back and then snap forward real quick, and that sets the gun off. So these guns are temperamental. He should have been trained doing that, with this being a real gun that they're using. They call it a cold gun when it's loaded with, the dummy rounds, as he calls it. But again, these are real explosives, and they should be taken seriously. And they should know that these guns might go off if you pull the hammer. So I don't view that as a valid excuse. But we're going to keep playing here.
I'm handed a gun, and someone declares, they said, this is a cold gun.
Dave Halls?
The first AD. In my years on the sets of film, hot gun meant that there was a charge in there, and cold gun meant there was nothing in there. When he's...
Cold gun, meaning there's a dummy round in there, saying that there's nothing in there. Again, a fully cold gun would be a completely a non-firing prop gun with no firing pin in it. So, I don't know that their terminology is going to be specific to each scenario. That might be the terminology that it is used on set usually. But even a cold gun with dummy rounds should be treated as a loaded weapon. This is in the Screen Actors Guild documentation, and it should be common knowledge if it is not. So
He's saying this is a cold gun. What he's saying to everybody on the set is you can relax.
that's a terrible assumption to make. And anytime that there's real firearms involved, you should not, I mean, definitely be relaxed because you don't want to be tense with these guns either, but you have to take it seriously. So just because there's dummy rounds in it, again, the dummy rounds can kill. Blank rounds can kill. The documentation says that in bold, underlined, right at the top of the document. It's not a mystery. It's something that everybody on set should know. So again, I'm not really moved by this.
The gun is empty.
That's what cold gun means.
Well, cold gun means there's no charge in there. There could be dummy rounds.
A dummy round look.
Dummy rounds have a charge in them. Dummy rounds is not a real phrase. They're blanks, okay, and all they do is take the projectile out. So again, not moved by this.
Looks like a real bullet, but is completely inert. It
Here's where ABC News is completely lying.
contains no explosive charge.
False, wrong, incorrect. There is an explosive charge. There is no projectile. This is basic common knowledge. It's really suspicious to me that ABC News did not catch this, and I really think they should be ashamed of themselves for including this blatantly false information. And this is why I haven't been reporting on all these news reports about what happened, because they get things wrong so often. And everybody should be aware of it, really. So just want to throw that out there.
And you were rehearsing that scene. Was it an actual rehearsal? There's some disagreement about that, whether it was a formal rehearsal at that time.
This is a marking rehearsal where I'm going to
A marking rehearsal, for those who don't know, is just like getting your positioning right when it comes to the shot. They're lining up the shot. They're showing where you're going to be in the shot, giving you your marks, which is where you stand, and where he should point the gun for the purpose of the shot.
show her. She's standing next to the camera. She's like this. You're me. She's got a monitor here. The camera.
Okay, so yes, this is the thing. He says in this, we'll play it in a bit here, but he says that she told him to point the gun there. Now, if somebody asks you to do something unsafe, they do, of course, hold responsibility for that. But also, you hold responsibility if you do not stop that from happening. If you do it as well, that is a choice that you made to do something that is unsafe. So just because somebody asks you to do something unsafe does not absolve you of responsibility, okay? I mean, if she asks you to jump off a bridge, it would be your responsibility if you actually jump off the bridge, even though she, of course, would be culpable as well. That's why I'm saying he's not the only one responsible. And I've always said that in my first video and everything. But again, just because she asked him to point the gun there does not mean that he has no responsibility for that. Additionally, she is looking at a 2D screen to the side. The real life thing is happening elsewhere. She's looking at the screen. Okay, she's telling him where to point the gun based purely on what she sees on this monitor, on a screen. She might not be aware of the fact that she is in the line of fire. And it is his responsibility as the person holding the firearm to be aware of where the muzzle is pointed at all times. It is known that when you have real guns, you know that these misfires, a misfire is just, it's just a discharge, okay? So guns can go off when you don't mean them to. It's not common, but that is why it is a rule never to point the gun in somebody's direction. So never point the gun in someone's direction in case of the situation like this would actually happen. Even if you don't intend to shoot and you just at all times you have to be aware of where the muzzle is pointing. And that is because every now and again, especially with 6-shooter revolvers like this, it can go off without you pulling the trigger, without you intending it to go off. It happens. So that is why it is a steadfast rule when it comes to guns that you don't point them in anyone's direction ever. And again, she might not be aware of the fact that she's in the line of fire because she's looking at a 2D screen. Now, that is me speculating. Maybe she was aware and it was just a mistake. But again, that doesn't absolve him of responsibility because she's asking him to do something unsafe, and he should step in at that point. And that is why I say, again, safety is everyone's responsibility on set and when it comes to any dangerous work in any field. So, just throwing that out there.
Here, filming that way. She takes a monitor that is his monitor, the operator, and turns it toward her. It swivels, and she says to me, "Hold the gun lower. Go to your right. Okay, right there. All right, do that. Now, show it a little bit lower." And she's getting me to position the gun.
Now, remember, again, in the scene, he said that he had to pull the hammer back. And he's told it was a cold gun. He said that a cold gun might have dummy rounds in it. Blanks can kill, never pointed in someone's direction, always treat it as if it's loaded. These are the top rules on that document I keep mentioning, that Screen Actors Guild document. So, again, this doesn't change anything.
Everything is in her direction. She's guiding me through how she wants me to hold the gun for this angle. And I draw the gun out, and I find a mark. I draw the gun out, I find a cut. And what's really urgent is the gun wasn't meant to be fired in that angle.
So if you're shooting...
That doesn't change anything either, you know, because, of course, it was an accident. We've always said all along, I mean, of course, you never know, right? I mean, maybe he did intend. I sincerely doubt it. But again, it's not an excuse to say that the gun wasn't meant to be fired, because it actually did, okay? So that's what actually happened, all right? And even if it was an accident, that doesn't change the fact that you purposefully pointed the gun in somebody's direction. So
directly into the camera lens, you're not aiming.
I'm not shooting into the camera lens. I'm shooting just off.
Just off.
Right, in her direction. I'm holding the gun where she told me to hold it.
That's the thing with the monitor. You know, again, he could have stopped it and said, "Hey, you need to move because you're in the way of the gun." The monitor, it's attached via wires, but you can move it. It's not something that is stuck in place. So again, you know, we're just going to move on.
Which ended up being aimed right in below her armpit, was what I was told. I don't know. This was a completely incidental shot, an angle that may not have ended up in the film at all. But we kept doing this, and so then I said to her, "Now in this scene, I'm going to cock the gun." And I said, "Do you want to see that?" And she said, "Yes." So I take the gun.
He's admitting to something that he should know could potentially cause a fire, and even if it has the dummy rounds in it, you shouldn't point it in somebody's direction. We're just repeating ourselves at this point.
And I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, "Do you see that?" She goes, "Well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that." And I cock the gun. I go, "Can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that?" And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun, and the gun goes off.
That's the thing that's meant to that does happen with revolvers. It's the thing he should be aware of, and there's something the producer should have said to him. So, you know, definitely not an excuse. So I think we might be done with this one.
I let go of the hammer of the gun goes off.
At the moment.
That's what happens. That's what the hammer does. You let it go, it goes off. You know, that's what the trigger does when you pull it on a 6-shooter revolver. When you pull it, it makes the hammer go back and then go forward really quick. That's what the trigger does. The hammer is the one doing the work that makes it explode. So again, it's entirely avoidable, you know.
That was the moment the gun went off, yeah. That was the moment the gun went off.
It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled.
This is what all the headlines were saying. I didn't pull the trigger. Again, it doesn't change anything. He touched the hammer of the gun, which is what's actually doing the work. When you pull the trigger, all it does is pull that hammer back and push it forward real quick. That's all it does. So he did, he may as well have pulled the trigger. Just throwing that out there.
Pull the trigger.
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never. That was the training that I had.
But he pointed a gun at someone and pulled the hammer back, which is essentially, it could be the same thing. Of course, that's not what you intend to have happen. You intend to cock it back. I mean, they do it in the movies all the time where you pull the hammer back. Only certain guns require you to do that. Most of the time, you can just pull the trigger and it'll work. I'm pretty sure this gun, I'd have to look up exactly what gun it is, but I'm fairly certain you don't have to pull the hammer back and then pull the trigger. The hammer back thing is just something they do for the movies for dramatic effect.
Point a gun at me and pull the trigger. On day one of my instruction in this business, people said to me, never take a gun and go click, 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 because even though it's incremental, you damage the firing pin on the gun if you do that. Don't do that.
That's what happens if it is empty, and that is actually correct. You don't dry fire a weapon. It does damage it over time. Definitely not a good thing to do. He is correct here. But again, he thought that the gun was loaded with dummy rounds, as he said. So that would not apply to that situation in that case. But again, he wasn't certain either way. So.
And Hall's attorney told ABC News that he was watching and agrees that Alec did not pull the trigger and that his finger was outside the trigger guard.
Again, like I said, this is inconsequential. I mean, this is something that he's going to say to try to get people on his side. And, honestly, it's just not, it doesn't change anything at all. The hammer is what's doing the work. He touched the hammer. It's a possible consequence of fiddling with the hammer that it might snap forward and go off. So, not at all absolving in any capacity. Other than to say that you could use this to say that he didn't do it intentionally. And I don't think anybody ever said that. So I certainly didn't.
So you have this Colt 45, you just pulled,
The hammer as far back as I could without cocking the actual
and you're holding on to...
He's just admitting to it. Like, this is not going to play well for him in court. And I'm surprised that... I sincerely doubt his lawyers advised him to do this interview. I'm speculating at this point. But it's not going to help him. I will just say that. Maybe in the court of public opinion, but again, that's why I'm making this video.
the hammer.
I'm holding that. I'm just showing. I go, how about that? Does that work? You see that? Do you see that? She goes, yeah, that's good. I let go of the hammer. Bang, the gun goes off.
That's a potential thing that can happen with these revolvers. Pretty much any gun with the hammer. Again, the hammer going back and forward is what the trigger does. So
Slug was a real bullet.
Had you known that Joel had been hit?
No one had any idea until that police officer, that sheriff's officer, said to me, "This is the slug, 45 caliber slug they took out of Joel."
Notice that he doesn't really answer the question directly, but he said that no one had any idea. Somebody brought these live rounds on set, which again, at the top of that Screen Actors Guild information that I keep referring to, it says no live rounds are to be on set ever. So somebody was aware of that, but again, that's why I say it's not only his responsibility. So don't act like I'm trying to put this all on him, because I'm not. There's many points of failure here. But I just want to stress that somebody knew. So, going to move on to part 3 here.
People said to me, I got countless people online saying, you idiot, you never point a gun at someone. Well, unless you're told it's empty, and it's the...
Being told it's empty doesn't change the safety guidelines that say, treat it as if it's loaded at all times. And again, he also said that he thought it could have been loaded with dummy rounds, which again, you don't point at anybody.
Director of photography who's instructing you on the angle for a shot we're going to do.
And again, I already mentioned this, but just because somebody asks you to do something unsafe doesn't absolve you of responsibility. Ultimately, it is still your decision. So,
and she and I had this thing in common where we both thought it was empty. And
this is a rehearsed line, I think. I would speculate that his lawyer came up with this. But again, it doesn't change anything.
And it wasn't. And that's not her responsibility. That's not my responsibility. Whose responsibility?
It isn't. I don't know about her responsibility. I don't think the cinematographer is ever supposed to really check that. But it is in part his responsibility. He is the one handling the firearm.
Remains to be seen. But I do.
Well, there are some who say you're never
He wants to find a patsy.
supposed to point a gun at anyone
Which is understandable.
on a set, no matter what.
George is right.
Unless the person...
There's some certain scenarios where you do, but again, there's extra checks in place when you are firing a dummy round at somebody directly. There are many, many steps in place. Usually you point it at a slight angle and use camera tricks, perspective tricks, like I mentioned in the last video.
Person is the cinematographer who's directing me where to point the gun for her camera.
He's acting like he doesn't have the ability to tell her, hey, you're in the way, please move. Or move the monitor back a little bit.
Angle. That's exactly what happened. That day, I did exactly what I've done every day on that movie.
Which is what?
And he's trying to throw the rest of the industry under the bus here. And I can't speak for every production. There may be productions where the safety is lax, but if that is the case, it has to change. And I think we've pretty much covered everything. There's one little last bit here I wanted to get to at the 7-minute mark.
And I popped a clip out of a gun, or I manipulated the chamber of a gun. They would take the gun away from me and redo it.
They're talking about that the armorers on set, he's saying, would yell at him or tell him not to mess with the clips or to look at anything if in case they did it wrong. And that might be the case. But again, the actor is supposed to check the blank rounds that are being fired, from my understanding.
The prop person said, don't do that, when I was young. And they'd say, one thing you would need to understand is we don't want the actor to be the last line of defense.
That's just so ridiculous, in my opinion, because they should be the last line of defense. They are the one holding the firearm. They are the one who is most responsible for it. I'm not saying they're 100% responsible. There are definitely a lot of other responsibilities, responsible parties, that is, but, they are the last line of defense. They're the one holding it. They can ultimately check it, and again, it should have been checked before, but you shouldn't just assume that other people are doing their job completely correctly, because people make mistakes all the time, and, I would say Alec Baldwin, most likely, I don't know for certain, of course, but he made a mistake, and I'm not saying he should be like in jail for life or anything for, murder of the highest degree, but he's certainly in some degree responsible, but ultimately it'll be up to the courts to decide that. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you disagree, you think I missed something or got something wrong, definitely let me know in the comments. Should be a discussion, but yeah, usually we do more lighthearted subjects, like I said, so hit the sub button if you want to see more reviews and movie stuff, and we talk about behind-the-scene movie stuff, which is why I think, this is a good thing to cover. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks for watching, and just want to say this is a tragic situation, and it's awful, and the family of the cinematographer are the ones that we should think of first when we think of this situation. So everybody have a good one, and I hope to see you on the next video. Peace out.